love dogs.
I love dogs too.
Glad we're all on the same page.
5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
Welcome to the Sarah Andreyko Show.
All right, awesome. So, and I want to make sure I get this right because I'm really good at butchering people's names. Is it Feuerbacher?
Yeah, that sounds good.
Close?
Yes, that's perfect.
Okay. Dr. Erica Feuerbacher. Excellent. Okay. And so you're with Virginia Tech and you're currently overseeing their Applied Animal Behavior and Welfare program, the online master's course. Right. And you've got lots of fun letters behind your name. You've got Certified Applied Animal Behaviorist, Board Certified Behavior Analyst, and you are Certified Dog Trainer through CCPDT, right. Knowledge Assessed,
yes,
correct?
You got it.
Okay. All right. So first, I kind of want to talk a little bit about that process because we have all these different divisions of dog trainers and behavior professionals. And so I kind of want to ask you a little bit about the path that you took in terms of getting your CAAB and becoming board certified and what kind of led you down that path to begin with.
Yeah, so I probably like a lot of us just was an animal child growing up and had all the animals my parents would let me have, which was a lot. They were incredibly generous. We had goats and sheep and chickens and dogs and horses. And so it was a ton of fun. But coming up in that era, if I said I wanted to work with companion animals, it was like, well, you're going to go to vet school. And I thought, no, I'm not going to go to vet school. But I didn't know what else. So I got a degree in biology and did a lot of animal behavior research with insects as an undergrad. And actually went to grad. Yeah.
That's awesome.
Yeah, I did honeybee research at Arizona State University, which was a lot of fun. And I still love our pollinators because of that.
Yeah, that's great.
And I ended up at UC Berkeley for a few years, just continuing that. But I never really stopped to think about like what animals and what about behavior I'm really passionate about. And at the same time, I gifted myself a working line German Shepherd. And so I was trying to keep up with her, and I knew I wanted to take her into agility, and we did get into competitive agility. And I just fell in love with dog training, and I thought it was so fun, and it was so fun to connect with my animal. And I learned about clicker training through our agility instructor, Catherine Horn, and it just changed my relationship with my dog, and it was really fabulous. And I realized that I would go home and read about dog training and not about insect flight. So I took a job at Peninsula Humane Society, an SPCA in San Mateo, California, in their behavior department, and really got my feet wet there in their sheltering world and animal behavior. And at that point, I was also teaching some classes. And so I sat for my CPDT and got that. But I still, I had gone to grad school for a few years, didn't finish my degree there, but really loved that inquiry. And the more I got into the dog training world, it just seemed like there was so much we didn't know, that we were basing so much of our research on rats and pigeons. And certainly there's a lot of continuity there. But I really wanted to help our field improve and address our own issues in an applied sense. So I went back to school at North Texas in behavior analysis, got my master's, and then worked at with Clive Wynn at University of Florida, getting my Ph.D. And so along the way, I picked up all the classes that were necessary for the CAB and had the experience, and so wanted to go for that certification as well.
That's fantastic. And I think, so you got your doctorate in psychology, in human psychology.
Right.
And,
yes.
That's one of the things that we kind of all laugh about in this field is that you get into dog training or behavior because you love the dogs and you want to work with the dogs. And a lot of us are, introverted and not always so great with the people. But in order to succeed, like you have to have kind of the human side of things too. And I can see where that would be a huge benefit to have, a psychology background in terms of how to work with people so that they can work with their own dogs. It's one thing for us to work with them, but to teach the people in a way that they can understand. And you have all these different types of personalities and, no one pet parent is the same. So I imagine that comes in handy a lot.
Yeah, it's, you're right. It's just like dog training where you have to adjust to your learner and the things that's going to resonate with them. I think human training is harder when we're working with the owners, largely because we don't control all of their reinforcers. And so we just have a lot less control over them following our instructions or finding what we want them to find valuable. Whereas with dogs, we can control things a little bit more. We have access to their toys and attention and food and all the other things that are valuable to them. But with their owners, it can be a little bit trickier for sure.
Yeah, finding what their reinforcers are for sure. Yeah, is this one, do I need to stroke the ego a little bit here? Do we need words of affirmation? Do I need to feed you too? Like, what do we need to
Right.
do?
And then I know so many folks, right? We get into the home thinking we're there for a dog training consult, and then it becomes a family issue. And there's family dynamics, and one person might find the training valuable and another person doesn't. And so you've got different people with different reinforcers, and they're not agreeing, and we're not trained in family counseling, so.
Right. Yeah. But given that you are, how do you kind of handle that situation? If you're working with people and you're like, okay, so by the way, I do have a psychology degree too. So here's what we're going to do.
Well, while I do have my BCBA for Board Certified Behavior Analyst. I'm not a counselor and I don't have that background. All of my work was in behavior analysis, so much more on the training and learning side rather than family counseling. So I try and draw from that of trying to understand how to set up the environment appropriately, how to arrange the antecedents so that I get the behavior I want, trying to identify those reinforcers for the owners, and sometimes you have to kind of scroll through different reinforcers until you see them kind of light up, and then you're like, okay, this
Boom.
is what matters to them, and this is what I'm going to have to deliver to try and maintain their behavior towards their dog.
Yeah, that it can be quite complicated, I imagine. So tell me a little bit about the research that you're working on. I've seen some of your publications that have come out, and it's really some fun stuff. And it sounds like, based on the educational path that you took, you were, hoping to kind of get into research because you weren't really satisfied with what was out there necessarily and wanted to be a part of that kind of progress in animal sciences. So, what have you been working on, and what's really kind of striking your research passion chord lately?
Yeah, you're absolutely right. I love creating knowledge and identifying, what's working for our practitioners and what's not. And oftentimes I think our practitioners are ahead of the research. They're doing great things, but it would be wonderful to put some data behind that. And so that's where I think I can help out, is really appreciating what practitioners do and then trying to assess it and figure out, how does this work? Why is it working? How can we improve it? So my interests largely are really around the human dog relationship. So I've done a lot of studies looking at what interactions dogs prefer from us, trying to understand how we can be better humans for our dogs. And of course, because I love dog training, a number of my papers have looked at identifying different reinforcers for dogs, which ones are most valuable and in which context. So looking at food and different magnitudes of food, social interaction. We just had a paper come out looking at social interaction as a reinforcer for dogs, as well as access to the owner. So that's historically what I've done a lot of, that and shelter dog welfare, looking at interventions to improve their lives. So those are still kind of my two main drives of shelter dog welfare and looking at how we can improve our learning and training, and especially around improving human dog interactions. In terms of bigger projects, we have a couple. We have a grant with Texas Tech University looking at dogs detecting the invasive insect, the spotted lanternfly. Texas Tech with Dr. Nathan Hall has been doing a lot of the lab work looking at the dog's limits of detection. And our side of the project is now just ticking up. We're going to be recruiting companion dogs, so not professional working dogs, but your pet dogs that might participate in like NACSW, and their owners to try and become citizen science teams detecting spotted lanternfly. So it's one of the big projects. And then we have our online master's program, and a number of students are doing some excellent data collection. And so we have a ton of cool projects going on there. Jim McGurk and Adrian Carson are looking at how well dogs retain a novel behavior they've been trained in the shelter once they're in the adopted home, which is going to speak to how and when we train our dogs that are in shelters. Miranda Hitchcock just defended, and she was looking at factors associated with behavioral euthanasia. Skylar Howard is just about to defend, and she's been looking at how adding a scent to a toy impacts dogs' interaction with it for an enrichment item. So we have lots of fun projects there.
Oh, that's great. Yeah, so much going on. And I noticed too, one of the things that I love is the Facebook page that I visited for the program, for the master's program for Virginia Tech. There's a lot of support and calls to action for people to get involved with companion animals to help be a part of the research as well. So anybody that's on that Facebook page, I mean, I think it's great to kind of go through that and see what studies are open and, who's conducting what research in order to kind of jump on board and be a part of that to kind of help with that. So I was really glad to see that. I'm like, okay, this is where you can collect a lot of people and get a lot of people onboarded to participate, you know?
It is. It's really fun, and we find that people and their dogs, they're fascinated by their dogs. And when you say, "I want to study your dog," they're really keen on it.
Yeah.
We usually don't have any problems recruiting folks that want to learn more about their dogs with us, and so it's really, yeah, it's really great. And thank you for mentioning that. We have a few studies. I think Rachel Lane has a survey open looking at puppy behavior. So there are always ways to get involved.
Yeah. And I thought it was really interesting to highlight the recent paper that you guys released in terms of social interactions because it's interesting. There's these big back and forth battles with dog trainers about using reinforcers and, oh, everybody's using food and they're bribing their dogs. And, oh, I'm only going to use play and I'm only going to use this. And sometimes the individual dog gets lost in translation of what trainers are trying to do with the dog instead of looking at, okay, what is this animal actually reinforced by? And so I love that paper in particular pointed out social interactions, access to, other animals or people or that kind of thing to where that can be a reinforcer. Anything in the environment can be a reinforcer to go smell the bush over there or to say
Right.
hi to my friend across the fence. And so I was really excited to see that. And I'm definitely going to push that out and share that because I feel people get so hung up on the reinforcer that they think is going to be most effective across the board instead of saying, this dog likes social interaction. This dog does not. This dog likes play. This dog likes food. And you know what? Today I might use a combination of 5 different types of reinforcers. So I was definitely excited to see that one come out.
Yeah, I think that's such a good observation that sometimes we get into our "this is how I do things" kind of recipe book, and instead of maintaining that flexibility of saying, "I use positive reinforcement, and my learner is going to tell me what's valuable to them, and I need to be able to engage and play, deliver social interaction that they want, or deliver food, or like you said, all those environmental reinforcers like." Can I let you sniff contingent on you not pulling me there? And
Right.
they're just so many reinforcers that we can utilize that I think we don't often recognize that. And so having that flexibility and always thinking about, what can I use in my environment to reinforce my dog, especially if you get kind of caught flat-handed or flat-footed with running out of treats or something. You need to have some other alternatives to be able to maintain the good behavior.
Yeah, and I have a case right now that I think is a good reminder. I have a German Shepherd that has to take digestive enzymes with everything that he eats. He's got EPI, so you can't give him treats, and we get hyperarousal when we're around Tug, and so it's one of those things where you might not be able to use what your typical go-to is, and you've got to be really creative. Otherwise, you can end up
Mhm.
with a client's dog or that is ill or off because of your typical go-to method. So it's fun to have
Right.
an entire bag of tricks, so to speak, in your toolbox to work with animals. So
Absolutely.
in terms of getting your cab or
Mhm.
looking into really applied animal behavior work in general in terms of from an academic perspective, if you've got behavior consultants, you've got dog trainers that are a little bit more interested in the applied animal side of things or applied ethology, what is kind of the benefit in going through that master's program? So you've got your bachelor's degree on board, you're interested in doing this, it's online. I mean, I think that's one of the benefits
Mhm.
right there is that you don't have to go into the classroom. But you're taking on debt, you've got extra schooling and extra work. So I really want to hear from your perspective because you've been through it, what the benefit is in terms of how it can affect your practice as a behavior consultant or a dog trainer to go through it, to work for that.
Yeah, yeah. So the online masters that we've devised and designed is really built for behavior professionals, like you said, that have their full-time lives where they are. They can't pick up and move for 2 years to a location, and so we've made it all online. It's asynchronous, although we add in optional synchronous alternatives. So we do, online Zooms together, and anybody that can join does, and we record it for those that can't, to try and build some community. But it is really designed for behavior professionals that want to really expand their knowledge of animal behavior, and hopefully have a more circumspect view of what they're doing and how to approach behavior cases that they're encountering. So I think, historically, these programs haven't existed, and so folks have to kind of piecemeal together their knowledge, right? They're going to a seminar here and getting an hour's worth, a seminar over there for, an hour's worth, and trying to cobble this together into a cohesive program for themselves. And those seminars could be fabulous, or they could, have some misinformation in them depending on the credentials of the person giving it. But it's also not cohesive, right? You're getting this person's perspective, and then you might hear something completely opposite because we're using different terms in another person's seminar. And so we really wanted to give that scientific backing to folks that wanted it, where we use scientific language throughout. We're drawing connections to each other's classes, and am very thrilled to have brought in some of my favorite people, like Dr. Jessica Heckman teaches for us, Dr. Lisa Gunter teaches for us, Dr. Mindy Waite, Dr. Christina Spalding. I roped in Dr. Megan Herron this year, and so we just have these folks that I think are really fabulous practitioners, really knowledgeable, and they all have the same goal in mind of helping behavior practitioners understand their system better and understand the complexities of it and where they can intervene. And so in our program, folks get, like you said, the ethology backing the kind of biological animal behavior. They're also getting really strong psychology and learning principles. And then we also offer courses from Mindy Waite and Christina Spalding in consulting, or Megan Herron does one on adjunctive approaches, so talking about nutrition and behavioral pharmacology and how that can impact things. So what I hope is that our students come out really understanding the multifaceted nature of behavior, and also knowing that there are many points of intervention for them. That yes, you might focus on changing consequences or antecedents, but should we be looking at the dog's nutrition as well? When should you talk to a veterinary behaviorist about behavioral pharmacology? What do we know about the stress response that this dog is going, and how is that impacting how successful our training is? So that's what I really hope for our practitioners is they come out with a cohesive view from multiple layers of analysis of behavior.
I find that so helpful. My whole behavior consulting business is whole dog behavior and wellness, because I try to take it from that approach exactly, where we're looking at nutrition and the gut microbiome and the medical history and the age and the breed and just everything that you can think of about this animal in particular as an individual, and putting that together so that we have lots of different tools in the toolbox. Some things might make a very tiny impact and some things might make a large impact, but collectively now we're making the best difference that we can make in this animal's life, basically, and therefore their pet parents too. So I like that kind of whole, as I would say, whole dog approach to where, we're looking at everything. So that's kind of, something of benefit there, is that you're getting this, 360 view all in one place, and that those classes are interconnected and you're working together to kind of help pull all of that together in one place. So that's great.
Right. It is. Yeah. And you're right. I mean, there are, well, I'll just say a few things. You don't have to enroll in our full program. You can take up to 4 classes without being in our program. So you can always kind of taste test it, see if it's for you, or maybe there's just one class that you're like, I want that class, that you could come in and take without, going through the full master's program. And our master's, it's technically non-thesis, but we do project and report, which I've essentially said it's going to be a thesis, because that will qualify our students for CAB. And as I mentioned before, I really want to create knowledge for our field. And so our students go into it knowing they're going to have an extensive research project that we hope will be publishable at the end, so that we can give back to our community and say, we've got more knowledge about the things that you are worried about or wondering about or are doing, and how they really work. Certainly, like you said, it is a self-funded program, and so folks have to kind of take that into account. I would say, generally speaking, behavior folks are just underappreciated financially. And so I recognize that that's a challenge of, is this going to elevate your income enough to counter that? I can't say for sure now. I'm hoping that as we get more and more folks out there with better and better credentials, that we elevate the field. And this kind of gets into your licensure mention previously, is hoping that kind of we can elevate that field and elevate owners' expectations of what their consultants should be doing, that they should be science-based and ethical and humane, um, and hopefully little by little, folks that use harmful techniques um, get pushed to the side a little bit and are not as prevalent. And I'm hoping that folks realize how complex this is. I mean, it's no different than child psychology, right? Behavior is complex. With humans, we certainly have verbal behavior, but I think it's sort of sad that folks are willing to let folks that have very little training and use harmful methods work with their animals. You hopefully wouldn't let them do that with your kids. So, like I said, I'm hoping that this sort of elevates the field, and hopefully some financial appreciation comes along with that.
Yes, we definitely need to work towards the financial appreciation. People do not go into behavior work just like vet med because they're in it for the money.
Right.
Anytime I hear that you just want money, you just want more money, I'm like, oh, if you had any idea. Yeah, sure.
Right.
Well, and I want
Exactly.
to look at this for a moment in terms of like elevating the field and, looking at some of the proposed legislation that's coming up and credentialing, because this is a big argument right now. And I think a lot of trainers are feeling threatened because language is being introduced. There's a bill that's been presented in Illinois right now that's going to define what dog trainer means. They're looking at setting up a board, and that board is going to determine who can and cannot use the term dog trainer, because you have to be credentialed under a program, which, for me makes sense. If you're going to call yourself something, what is your educational background? Do you have the hands-on experience? And what does that look like? Because I think there's unfortunately a lot of ignorance in terms of pet parents, and that's not a bad thing on them. They just don't know. How do you know if the person that calls themselves the professional and is flashy and has lots of marketing and maybe bought a lot of likes and subscribes but doesn't really have it yet?
Yeah.
How do you know you're getting that? The fake it till you make it, essentially, or the person who has years and years of experience, is hands-on, is credentialed. So I think there's a lot of education for pet parents in particular to help them understand the differences of what you're getting and what you're not. And some of that regulation might, be that filter that could be in place to help. And I know there's a lot of argument out there about, if regulation is in place, then, they're going to ban certain tools, and, you're going to tell me how I can and can't train. And at least with what's being proposed in Illinois right now, there's not a ban. We're looking at Lima, in terms of practices, and a joint standard of practice, which multiple organizations are on board with. So your certifying organization, CCPDT, APDT, IAABC, and every other acronym we can think of course, right? But they're on board, and they're all coming together to say, yes, we believe in these practices, and this is what we believe is going to elevate the animal welfare field in terms of behavior and training. And I think there's a big argument out there because of that regulation. So what are your thoughts too on saying, okay, if we're going to call ourselves dog trainer or behavior consultant, or my favorite in the US, behaviorist, because UK and US are different with that terminology.
Right.
What are your thoughts on some of this proposed legislation that's out there with saying, okay, we're going to have a board, we're going to have a certifying body, and you have to be under one of these credentialing programs to call yourself this?
Yeah, I mean, I think our field has been so historically unregulated, and I think the dogs and the owners that care for them suffer for it. I agree with you. The owners are trying to do the best thing. When I see somebody taking their dog to a trainer that I know is not going to help that dog, I know the owner wanted to try and help. Right? They're putting money into this, and it's so unfortunate that they ended up with somebody that is not going to help their dog or potentially could harm their dog. And I feel really awful for them. And so it is really hard. And so I am on the side that I think we do need governance. We need some oversight to make sure that folks who say they're doing this actually, like you said, have the scientific understanding of behavior, of training, know how to do it humanely, know how to use positive reinforcement effectively, and then see if there are tools that they need to add on, but it's not their go-to tool right from the start. Um, so I think this is essential for our field to move forward. I do think we have to be careful in how it's done. That's that's where I think it'll come down to is that those licensure statements need to be really carefully defined so that we are producing and licensing what we value. And so I think that will help our field. It is really challenging, and I think as a lot of practitioners that are really fabulous, like you said, it can be hard to compete with folks that are flashy, but and use wording that is deceitful. That they will say, they will put in these words that they know the owner is looking for, but then when you actually look at their practice, it doesn't line up with what they're saying. And it's not the owner's fault, right? They were looking for this person that used positive reinforcement based training, and then you have them, putting shock collars on or prong collars, and so I think that's unfair to the owner who is trying to do the right thing. So I think this is where we have to move. I know it is concerning on how it's executed, but this happens in all professional fields, right? We have medical boards, we have boards for behavior analysts, we have boards for clinical psychologists, because we can't just have folks hanging their shingle and saying, I'm a dog trainer, without anything to back it up.
Yeah, no, I agree with that for sure. And other countries are already doing that. They already have it implemented. And, we're typically slow to move on different things that other countries are advanced at. I hate to say that, but it's true. But I mean,
It
Germany,
is.
for example, not that I support a full out ban, because I'm probably in the minority here, but I'm very much of the camp that methodology matters. And so I'm not necessarily for like, oh, we need to ban this and we need to ban that. It's more about kind of the human practice, the human to dog practice, and what you're doing for that dog in front of you. Whereas in like Germany, they have a ban on e-collars and on prong collars, because those things could potentially be used abusively or in a way that is going to cause more harm than good. And it's tough because, you want people to be free to do the things that they want to do. We are the land of the free, and we make our own decisions and we build our own, legacy. But at the same time, it's tough because we have so many people that do misuse and mistreat animals and don't even realize that they are, because of,
Right.
what they grew up with or what they're used to, or, the results that they're seeing that they think can carry on every single case. If you've got somebody working in obedience with high arousal, high drive dogs, and you're using e-collars for off leash and they're handling it just fine, and then you try to use an e-collar the same way that you've been using that in obedience with a dog that has, fear related responses and, situational or environmental anxiety, now you got a big problem on your hands. And it's like, well, it just didn't work for that dog. So on one hand, removing certain tools filters out that pool or that population of people that can misuse it or don't understand what they're doing, or but at the same time, it's like, yes, but is it really the e-collar or the prong collar that's causing the problem? Is it the methodology that's causing the problem, or is it the tool? I feel like it's the same conversation of, is it the pit bull type dog that is the problem, or is it a lack of responsible ownership, which is why our, breed bans are being repealed all across the nation, because surprise, it was a Band-Aid fix and it didn't work. So, I mean, what are your thoughts on that? Do you think like kind of controlling the tools that are available is the way to control methodology? Or do you think it's more of, guys, let's be responsible and let's increase our education and let's look at what science and research is out there so that we don't have to necessarily ban things, but we can move forward collectively based on methodology? What's your kind of take on that?
Yeah, so I think you bring up a good point of, is it the tool? Is it how it's used? And that's where, we really need more research. We really don't have that. There have been, doing studies on e-collars and prong collars are hard to do because, to me, it's unethical to put that tool on a dog that wasn't going to receive it anyway, and subject them to that, especially knowing the potential behavioral fallout. And so those studies are hard to conduct in a controlled setting. And so we're, research has been trying to piece together evidence for how do these things work. I think we do know from a lot of basic research the behavioral fallout of aversive methods, regardless of how they're used. Most of those historically have been used with like shock. And it certainly, it would certainly behoove us to study other types of punishers, things that maybe aren't as severe as shock. How does that affect the animal's behavior so that we can make educated decisions on how to go about this? I am certainly for not giving Joe Public access to these tools. It bothers me when I walk into a pet store and see shock collars readily available and prong collars readily available to folks that aren't going to use it appropriately, aren't going to understand the importance of timing or contingency or anything like that.
Or the fallout
And
that
so,
happens when it's not used correctly. Yeah.
exactly. Yeah, absolutely. And we see so many folks who again tried to do the right thing by their dog and sent them to a trainer that then used one of those tools, and now the dog is worse. Like you said, these dogs that had fear and anxiety to begin with, and this just exacerbated it. And they were fearful before, and now they're outright aggressive or dangerous. And so I'm certainly for not allowing access to that. If we don't want to go a full ban right now, which I could understand when, especially as we transition, that there could be a stepwise process and see how it goes. I'm all about database decisions. Is ensuring that people have proper training and proper skills and proper understanding, that they have to maybe get licensed to use those tools. I mean, I don't use those tools. I don't recommend them. I've never felt the need to use one of those tools on a dog. And so, if we're not for an outright ban, and certainly, I think if we ban those, people are horrible sometimes, right? They find new ways
Yeah.
to get done what they want to get done. And so I think part of this comes back to education of we need to start really building better skills and better understanding of behavior, so that when faced with that choice, and even if the prong collar is banned, that they don't say, well, I could do it this other way. That's not technically a prong collar, but has the same behavioral effect. But certainly, limiting that to certain people that have certain skills and that have to then demonstrate that they don't use that tool as the go-to tool. This is one thing that I really like about the behavior analyst ethics code, is that you have to essentially exhaust your positive reinforcement toolbox before you could ever think about stepping up on that kind of Lima chart. And oftentimes you have to get approval by a larger body to do that. You can't just say, well, now I'm going to do this because I tried everything. Other people have to weigh in and say, no, you ought to try this first. And right now, it's kind of a free for all in the dog training world of what tools you want to use and when and how. So I think there's a lot more oversight that could be given. Like I said, if we don't want to go an outright ban, and I think there are lots of steps that we could put in place that would at least restrict those tools to folks that have more training, and at the same time require them to show that is not their initial go-to option, that they explore all these other options first. That also has to come with making sure those folks have those skills to use those positive reinforcement strategies effectively. I think that's the other thing is, as you mentioned, if somebody's been using a prong collar all their life, and then you say, well, now you have to use positive reinforcement. I know when I'm starting out, right, with that, my timing was off. My mechanical skills were off. And so they might say, well, positive reinforcement doesn't work for them because they haven't learned those skills. And so we need to make sure that they are as skilled in these other strategies as they are in their old strategy. And I think that will help move folks away from those more aversive methods.
Well, it is. It's competency based. It really is. I think that it's not as easy. It requires more skill to really think about what the dog in front of you is responding to and accepting that feedback and utilizing that feedback in a way that you can shape the behaviors that you're looking for with reinforcement. I think that that takes a shift, a mind shift. I always think about when low stress handling came into practice with the veterinary world. I was working as a veterinary nurse and I worked primarily emergency, and emergency handling is extremely different from companion animal handling. You got to get in there, you're going to restrain them, you're going to get it done. Boom, boom, boom. We're not here to make the animal feel comfortable. We're here to, save their life. So when, in working in private practice, when low stress handling came on board, it was quite a shift. It was almost like, I don't know how I'm going to do this. I'm going to get my face torn off because I can't handle these animals without using this restraint, without using some of these forceful techniques. So even for me, who I want to do best by the animal, I was terrified. I was like, I'm going to die. I'm going to have a Rottweiler take my face off, or a cat is going to shred me to pieces, and that's not the case. It's just that you have to learn a different skill set to be able to implement it, to be able to do it. It is possible. And I think sometimes that fear of, oh no, I'm going to get hurt, because you're going to get hurt if you try it right off the bat without having any knowledge behind you or having mentorship or having the education. Absolutely. You can't just be like, boom, I'm going to change everything that I do, the next day. It takes some onboarding. But to bring it to your point about having a body that says, yes, this is a good idea, or no, it's not. I kind of like that. So IABC does that. I think it was last year or maybe the year before. The ethics committee put into play, we're not banning tools. We're not banning the use of tools. However, if you want to use a tool that is typically used in a punishing fashion, or is considered aversive because the methods behind it is typically aversive, then we want you to pitch it to our ethics committee. And if we think that you're being ethical in your approach, all right, then we'll approve that. If we think that you're being unethical in your approach and you want to do that and you move forward with doing that, we'll pull your credentials. Like, we all abide by, these kind of guidelines in terms of what we've laid out for animal welfare. And if we think that if you've pitched us that you're going to do this in a way that we believe as a body, as an entire committee is ethical, then we'll allow it. But you've got to run it through the team first. And I think having more heads together about what other alternatives are there other alternatives is really helpful and important in improving someone else's practice, because maybe they are brand new, they just got credentialed and they have no idea what else to do. But on the flip side, I want to throw this thought at you. I want to pitch this to you because I hear all this language about, tools being, especially with Lima, like the last thing to do. If we're looking at, implementing a tool, we've done all these other things and now we're going to implement the tool. And in my practice, just from my own personal experience, if I'm exasperated in a case to where I've tried all these different things and now I have to turn to something else, the last thing I'm going to turn to is an aversive tool. That tells me I need someone else. I need help on board. Is it a vet behaviorist? Is it another behavior consultant? Is it a CAB? Is it somebody else that can jump in and say, what haven't you tried? Or I've done this, maybe you should try this. Or, hey, I'll take that case for you because, you're struggling with it. The last thing I'm going to do is go to a tool as a last ditch effort. If I'm ever going to go to a tool, which I don't really use them in my practice either, if I'm going to go to a tool, I'm going to go to like an e-collar and I'm going to use that in a way that does not involve punishment. I wouldn't use an e-collar in a way that involves punishment. And so I think that's where I get hung up a lot, is that, in working with foster dogs and rescue dogs for so long, when I did used to use e-collar, I didn't pair it with punishment. There was no aversive, because I would pair it with my deaf dogs in particular, either a tap or a vibration, just depending on how they responded. Some dogs are like terrified of the vibration. So even trying to condition them to that, it's no go. I don't want them uncomfortable. But I feel like if you're going to use a tool, again, my opinion, like that would be something that you start with because the dog has the confidence and you can build an association. And if you can't, that's out the door. As opposed to all of this conversation that I hear about like, oh, I've tried everything else. It's a last ditch effort. To me, the last ditch effort is bringing somebody else on board, talking to somebody else that might have a different strategy.
Yeah, I mean, I think that is absolutely correct. There's so much collective knowledge out there, and it's hard for one person to have contacted everything. This is why, when you go to a doctor, you might have a general practitioner And then when you have this specific behavioral issue or medical issue, you get sent to a specialist because they see that case, right? They see that. And so they understand the whole spectrum, whereas your general practitioner isn't going to see that. Or, if you have something that has been insolvable by all of your medical team, you go to maybe a teaching hospital that gets all these weird cases because you need to
Yeah.
find that doctor that saw that one weird thing. And you read stories about this all the time, right? Of this person that's had this like years long condition that nobody's been able to fix. And then they happen to be referred to the right doctor who saw somebody like that before or heard of another case. They know how to treat you. And so I agree. I think turning to our community, eh, we sometimes feel kind of like a solitary practice, right? We're this one person running our business. And maybe there's even maybe some competition for resources and clients. But I think really recognizing that our community is and should be helpful, that you can turn to folks and get support. You're going to become a better trainer, right? I'm still learning all the time, and I love listening to practitioners who are honing their skills and refining what we do. And so I agree. I mean, I think turning to the larger community at that point, saying I'm stumped. What other things can we try? And sometimes it's just like that one little tweak, right? Of like, oh, I just need to switch that, switch how the owner's doing this, or try this new environmental approach, or bringing some different meds on board. Can really change the life for that animal and the human. And also, being able to make good decisions about behavioral euthanasia and identifying when that is the best option for the dog and the owner. And not, I think behavior is particularly hard because there does always seem to be this, well, let's try one more thing. Maybe if you just try it longer and harder, and at some point, the dog and the owner are not thriving, might be a danger to each other, might be a danger to society, and so we have to have those tough conversations too.
Yeah, that reminds me. So you were mentioning Miranda just offended for, and her topic was behavior euthanasia. Is that recorded? Is that available for people to listen?
Her thesis should be out on ProQuest. So if you go onto Google Scholar and search on Miranda Hitchcock, her work will come up. I know she's working on getting that published as well. So hopefully there'll be some out in peer-reviewed journals soon too.
Excellent. I think that's so helpful. It's such a difficult conversation, and you're right. I feel like we'll just try this one more thing. We'll just do this one more thing, and it's like, okay, where's that straw? But it's such a difficult conversation
It
for pet
is.
parents, especially when they've been trying so hard and they love their animals so much, and they feel like if I had been better, if I had just, and it's like sometimes there is not
Exactly.
that if I had, there's nothing you can do.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think having, those conversations, um, I'm certainly against like breed specific legislation. I think, like you said, that's it's a useless patch. I also don't like the approach of it's all on how you raise them, because I think that puts it isn't. We know how much genetics and epigenetics affect
Yes.
behavior, and early, experiences in the womb, things that the owners could have no control over. And so I think that adds to the guilt of like, like you said, if I had just done this differently. Certainly, you can create dangerous dogs,
Hmm.
but that is not to say that every dog that's out there that's engaging in dangerous behavior was, human caused in the sense of, training, in some way. And so I think recognizing, like you said, that there are some dogs that have unfortunately been damaged somewhere along the way. The confluence of genetics and environment, and there's no guilt to be dispensed anywhere. So
Yeah, I think pet parents take a lot of comfort in that because there are some people that I work with that, I do have a history on their puppyhood and what they were or were not exposed to, 9 weeks and under. And, sometimes you just have to say, listen, we're going to do everything that we can, but you need to understand that some of this is permanent. So while we can make things better, are we going to get it to the point to where it's what your expectations are? We're not going to cure this because there are things that we simply cannot change. If your puppy was attacked during a critical fear period, okay, unfortunately, we're looking at some permanent damage. What can we do to mitigate it, make the dog feel better, lower the stress? But yeah, I think
Right.
even just being able to explain that to people helps them kind of come to terms and look at the dog they have in front of them, not the dog that they've always wanted, kind of thing. So next time when you get a dog or a puppy, then we can talk about what to look for and what to avoid. But for now, this is what's in front of you. And I think that kind of sometimes will actually bridge the relationship a little bit better because now they feel like they have an understanding and maybe a little bit less guilt of, well, if I had socialized them more, if I take them to the dog park more, no. I'm
Yeah.
glad you didn't take them to the dog park more. No, we're good. So, but yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that it is hard for folks to readjust their expectations. But like you said, I think once they get there and say, well, how do I help this dog? Maybe this is not my farmer's market dog, right? That can go out in public spaces with me all the time. And I had to do that with our old Malinois, who I adopted for agility. And she's just way too environmentally sensitive for competitive agility. So it's like what can we find to do together that makes her feel safe and I have fun with as well. So we do a lot more hiking, and so like you said, learning how to help the dog, recognizing that some of these things are going to be long term and you can mitigate it, but your dog's always going to have this like tinge of that, right? You're going to have to be on the lookout for people, like for us, people directly approaching your dog because she's not going to handle that well.
Yeah.
So that becomes the role of the owner to be the advocate for the dog they have.
Yeah, and I think that's so important so that they can see their dog for who their dog is, what their personality
Mhm.
really looks like and become that bubble for them in outside environments. And yeah, I think that's important.
Yeah,
So,
and I think that goes back to our initial conversation about like identifying the learner's reinforcers, right? Like you might like hiking, but if your dog gets freaked out about it, or you like going out to farmers markets and concerts and want to take your dog and your dog doesn't enjoy that, learning how to understand what's valuable to your dog and saying, okay, well, you're not going to come to the farmers market with me. We'll find another activity later on, that we could do together, and recognizing them as an individual and figuring out what matters to them in their life, I think hopefully enhances both parties' lives.
yeah, and not looking at well, I can't go to the farmer's market and I can't take my dog to the brewery. What can I do with my dog? What
Right.
activities can I involve my dog with? That kind of thing. Like, oh, I always wanted to do agility. Okay, well, can you build an A-frame and maybe set up some weed poles in the backyard? Like, there's all these different
Exactly.
things that you can do, to help. So, yeah, I think it's really good to have some
Absolutely.
of those on-hand alternatives, just like behavior modification, when we're looking at taking one behavior and providing an alternative behavior that's safer and, less stress. Same with activities. Oh, I always wanted the dog that I could just take everywhere with me. I get that all the time. It's like, yeah, it's not really the dog you have. So
Right,
let's
right.
start with
What
what you
can we
can
do?
do.
Yeah, yeah. Are there certain parts of, maybe your dog can't go all the places you want them to go, but maybe they can go 10% of the places, right? The
Yeah,
the hikes or the public parks that have lots of space, and yeah, build up from there.
exactly. So before I let you go, because I know we're running out of time. I don't want to keep you all day, but I do want to know about the upcoming canine symposium that you have and what's involved with that. And if people can still jump in and kind of get on board with that, whether in person or virtually. Are you doing it both? Are they doing virtual and in person?
We are, yeah. This is our first time doing it, so it's our ninth annual Canine Science Symposium. It's May 20th and 21st in San Francisco. It's 2 days of all canine science. We have some great speakers: Lisa Gunter, Lindsay Merkham, Monique Udell, Sarah Marshall Pacini, who works at the Wolf Science Center in Vienna, Angela Perry, who does a lot of dog genetics. Um, I know I'm forgetting some folks, but we have a really great lineup. Um, and yes, so I mentioned it's in San Francisco, but this time we're offering a Zoom option, at least for part of the day. So we have main sessions in the morning, breakout sessions where there'll be two sessions running at a time. Those unfortunately won't be Zoomed at the moment. We might reassess, but at the moment they're not. But all those morning sessions can be accessed through Zoom. And our website is Canine Science Symposium, and you can find out there about the pricing. You can come for 1 day or 2 days. Same thing with Zoom. You can Zoom on one day, Zoom on both days. So hopefully it makes it more accessible, and it it should be really fun. I love going to it. I learned so much from the other folks presenting.
What continuing education credits are available?
We are finishing getting them, but we should have CPDT and IAABC CEUs. And I think we can also look into PPG. So we should have CEUs for any of those organizations.
Perfect. Perfect. Everybody's always wanting to know, make sure it goes towards
Yes.
my towards my credentialing.
That's right. Exactly.
Awesome. Thank you so much. That's perfect. I'm going to be in attendance for sure. I'm excited. This will be my first go round with the Canine Symposium. So I'm really excited to see definitely some of the speakers that you listed. That's going to be fun. So if people want to get in touch with you or ask questions about the program, they might be interested in getting a master's as well or getting their CAB. What's the best way to get in touch or reach out with questions?
Yeah, so usually my email is best. It's my initials E, N as in Nancy, F as in Frank, 007 at vt.edu. You can also look me up on our Virginia Tech website. So I'm the only Feuerbacher on there. So if you just type in my name, it'll come up. We also have a Facebook page. It's like, facebook.com/AAB for Applied Animal Behavior VT, AAB VT. You can keep up with what our lab's doing. And like you said, the studies that we have going on that we're oftentimes recruiting folks to participate in. And certainly using Facebook Messenger to get in touch with me about masters or anything else is another good way.
That's perfect. I will put your email and the links that you mentioned in the show notes too, so people can directly access that and access you. And hopefully we'll encourage more people to look into the program.
Sounds great. I appreciate it.
Thanks so much for your time. This was great. I really enjoyed meeting you virtually and learning more about the program and the research and what you guys are up to.
Thanks. Well, thanks for hosting me. It was really fun chatting with you too.